Hi, and welcome to part two of this message. Thank you for um, listening. So, after pretty much the first few hours of the incident, as I allowed the waves of those emotions, anger, despair, and most of all fear, actually, to move through, and also helplessness in regard to my daughter, seeing her experiencing this, I began to witness my internal responses. So essentially, applying that which I have learned over the decades, really through yoga, and which has luckily become second nature for me. It just kicks in, which I'm very very grateful to for. Um, and this experience has been, in a way, like a crash course reminder of many, many yogic principles, which I would like to share here. So, the first thing, like I said, was fear. I'm very, very familiar with fear. I have learned to observe it, allow it to arise. I have learned to distinguish or discern between fear that is relevant, because not all fear is unnecessary. There are fears that are necessary, that help us to stay alive, that protect us essentially. But there are also fears that we are holding in our body as a result from past experiences, and that could stop us or limit us in further experiencing life, essentially. So there are echoes from past still resonating through our body consciousness, and especially me, I have had a history of car accidents, not causing them, but I was in 3 car accidents between the ages of 6 and 11, so I was fairly young. And I've dealt with that in various ways and applied various practices to release that energy, that fear from my body, because it's not a healthy fear to have, because driving, especially here in Australia, is an essential part of our life. We have to move around in a car. Um, so I could feel my nervous system slipping into familiar patterns of PTSD pretty much straight away. Looping thoughts, anxiety, tension, and in a way, a sense of paralysis. I witnessed myself going into a fear of never wanting to get into a car again, not because I'm not a good driver, but because there are people out there who make very rash decisions and put others at risk. So I caught it. I stopped myself in or on track straight away, and I went into presence and remembered everything that I had learned: observation, awareness, breath, and coming into the space in between, the stillness. And I realized I had a choice. It is my body. I could go down the road of fear. I could go down the road of forgetting and just disregarding everything that I've learned over the decades, and essentially make the choice to allow this imprint of this fresh new experience, even though it was a repeat of something that I had already experienced many decades ago, um, to anchor into my body consciousness, to take root, to plant a seed, and to grow there. Or I could choose to unplug it straight away, to just take the essentially the weeding. When we weed, we plug weeds in our garden, the plants that are, not allowing other beautiful flowers to grow. I could choose to not even allow it to take root. I acknowledged what I felt. I honored the emotions, because that's very, very important. It's not about disregarding what arises. It's not about not acknowledging fear or anger, all those emotions that we would classify as unwanted or negative, but to acknowledge them, to allow them to arise, and to apply the practices that keep me present and free. And it reminded me again that I am, and each of us is, without exception, the master and holder of our own space. We have choice. We have choice to respond in any given situation in any way we choose is beneficial for us and we choose is the best course of action. But we need to learn to do this from a space of presence. So not responding from fear. It reminded me that I'm the holder of my vessel, which is body, energy, mind, heart, and beyond, right? And that yoga truly is not just something that we do on the mat. We learn on the mat all these tools. We learn on the mat to breathe slowly, to be present, to reconnect with body, energy, whatever we want to call it. And then we take that into life. We apply it. And that is why yoga is called a science, because we apply certain measures, tools, of which we can see the result later. And which we can apply again and again and again in many, many different situations, and we can see the results later. Sometimes sooner, sometimes a lot later. Another teaching that came up for me are the yogic principles of raga and dvesha. Raga are the things that we classify as pleasurable, the things that we like to experience, that are nice, blissful, joyful, and dvesha is the opposite. Dvesha is what we classify as negative. I don't want to experience that. I never want to be in a car accident again. I never want to feel this fear again, this threat to my life, essentially to my child's life. They are our aversions. And most of us, or we all have them based on our experiences, based on past negative, positive experiences, because that too is an imprint that has stored in our body, and our body consciousness, our heart mind remembers this was nice, this was not nice, this was pleasurable, this was painful. I don't like pain. I want to avoid that. But both concepts are concepts of a dualistic reality, of a dualistic perception, which is part of our experience here in the human body, in these lives that we experience. However, in truth, in absolute truth, we are non-dual. That is what yoga and also the teachings of Advaita Vedanta teach us, show us. We are each an essence, a spark of divine consciousness, experiencing life through these dimensions, through these differences, but we are also on our way back to oneness. So we've moved into separation, we've moved into fragmentation, where we learn these dualistic concepts. They all have valid they all give us valid experiences, but we can choose, not everyone wants to, but we can choose to move back into oneness, where we understand that this is not the truth of my being. This is something that I experience, but it is not the truth of who I really am. In truth, so in yoga, we say life is wave in an ocean or on an ocean. The nature of being is the true nature of being is non-dualistic. It's just being consciousness, but through the fluctuations or through the waves we experience, up, down, left, right, this and that. True nature is just true self, Purusha, and that remains unchanging. And we can observe the fluctuations. So in truth, 2 seconds later, the whole experience could have ended very, very differently. But in truth, who I really am can never die. Who I really am is that true spark, the essence, and that would have always been unharmed. However, I know I'm protected, and there's no point in going down the road of what if. So it taught me to really understand again, or this has come up for me to understand, that life and the situations we sometimes experience are out of our control. We cannot control everything. Yes, we want to avoid negative experiences, and we don't necessarily have to put ourselves intentionally into a negative experience. That's not necessary, but we cannot avoid situations that are out of our control and that we would classify through the dualistic learnings in this lifetime as negative, as creating suffering and pain. I cannot live in fear of another car accident for the rest of my life. I certainly should not or cannot live in fear of my daughter ever experiencing another car accident in her life. Because that fear itself would be limiting to my experience here, to my life here. And it would also be limiting to her, and it would teach her to be in fear. And I don't want her to live her life in fear. I want her to live in a state of bliss, joy, and to be open to life's flow through her, right? And while this may sound a little bit strange, it helped me over just the past few days, not straight away, obviously, but it helped me to find aspects in this situation that I can appreciate, right? If it's only that I was reminded of these certain yogic principles, only to be reminded of being grateful for everything that I have in my life, of life itself, appreciating what I have. And it really gave me the opportunity again to witness fear rise within me and to process it immediately instead of pushing it down to resurface later. Because whatever we do not address in any given moment in time, whatever we do not address in a situation when it comes up, which is fine, we have choice, we can address it or we can push it down, but whatever we do not address, it will come back. It does come back later. So sometimes it is better not to address something straight away, and it helps us to just maybe put it onto another corner of our desk, but then in good time we attend to it, because otherwise we just store it here and it does influence us later on. And the more we push it down, the more in the end it will scream at us to look at and to release and balance out, purify essentially. Another reflection that came up for me was around my tendency to always want to protect and take suffering and pain away from others. And in this case, of course, my child. I mean, she's the number one major important thing in my whole life. And as a parent, it has been one of the hardest lessons for me to learn to step away and to allow her to have her own experiences that we or I would classify as painful. Seeing her in pain and emotional pain, I'm not talking about physical pain, although physical pain comes into it too, but to allow her to go through her experiences, to hold space for her, but not take part in the pain and suffering. Because if I do that, I'm no longer a space holder for her, because I'm paralyzing and restricting myself through the suffering that I feel from her and that I make my own. And I also learned that, what also came up is, if I take that away from her, I essentially take a growing and learning experience away from her that would be beneficial for her and that would make her grow in her own person so much more. And she's her own beautiful divine being. She carries that spark of divine consciousness that she is. And so, who am I to determine what she needs to experience in order to grow in her own way and shine her light even more strongly? Um, that's not my job. So that's a pretty major lesson for me, or acknowledgement and realization. Sorry, to step away, observe her and her pain, and to understand I cannot take it away from her, but I can be there for her. So this is the end of part 2. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in part 3.